The gunshot cracked through the frozen air behind her, and Katherine Brennan knew that stopping meant dying. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled through the deepening snow, her thin dress already soaked through and clinging to her legs. The wind howled across the Nevada high desert, carrying with it ice crystals that stung her face like needles. Behind her, she could hear their voices, angry and vengeful, cutting through the storm. They had found the lockbox. They knew what she had done. Katherine's feet were numb inside her worn boots, but she forced herself to keep moving. The storm had rolled in from the mountains an hour ago, turning the landscape into a white hell. She could barely see 10 feet ahead, but that same blinding snow was the only thing keeping her alive. It hit her tracks almost as quickly as she made them. Another shot rang out, but it was distant now, swallowed by the wind. She had worked in the Silver Star Saloon in Winnemucca for 2 years, serving drinks and avoiding the grabbing hands of miners and drifters. She had kept her head down and saved every penny she could hide away. But then she had seen what Marcus Aldrich and his men were planning. She had overheard them in the back room, talking about the payroll robbery, about killing the guards, about framing the Chinese workers who had just finished the railroad extension outside town. She had taken the ledger, the one that proved everything. The one that showed Aldrich had been stealing from his own mining company for years, that he had murdered his partner, that he owned half the crooked lawmen in 3 counties. She had planned to take it to the federal marshal in Carson City, but Aldrich had men watching the roads. So she had run, clutching the ledger inside her dress, hoping to circle around through the hills. Then the storm had hit. Katherine's legs gave out, and she fell hard into a snowdrift. The cold was beyond anything she had ever experienced. Her fingers were stiff and white, and she could no longer feel her face. She tried to push herself up, but her arms would not cooperate. The world tilted and blurred. Snow settled on her eyelashes, and she realized with a strange detachment that she was dying. She thought of her mother, dead these 5 years from consumption. Her father, killed in a mine collapse when Katherine was 16. She thought of the little brother she had lost to fever, and how she had promised him she would make something of herself, that she would be brave. The snow began to bury her. Then, through the white curtain of the storm, a shape appeared, dark and solid, moving with purpose. Katherine tried to call out, but her voice was gone. The shape resolved into a man on horseback, leading a pack mule. He was tall in the saddle, wrapped in a heavy coat with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. As he drew closer, she saw his face, sharp-featured and weathered, with several days of dark stubble on his jaw, his eyes, though. Even through her fading consciousness, she saw his eyes. They were a deep brown, almost black, and they widened with alarm when they found her. "Jesus Christ," the man said, swinging down from his horse in one fluid motion. He was beside her in an instant, his gloved hands on her shoulders. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" Katherine managed a weak nod. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had first thought. Maybe 25 or 26. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw and a nose that looked like it had been broken once. "My name is Zachary Ironwood," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "I am going to get you out of this. Do you understand?" She nodded again. He did not waste time with more questions. Instead, he shrugged out of his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. The world spun, and she found herself draped across his saddle. He mounted behind her, pulling her back against his chest and wrapping one strong arm around her waist. "There is a lined shack about a mile west," he said, more to himself than to her. "We can make it." He urged the horse forward, and Katherine felt the animal's powerful muscles moving beneath them. Zachary held her tight, and she could feel his warmth seeping through the coat, through her frozen clothes. She tried to stay conscious, tried to remember the ledger pressed against her skin, but the darkness was pulling at her. "Stay with me," Zachary said, his voice close to her ear. "You hear me? Stay with me." "What is your name, Katherine?" she whispered. "Katherine Brennan." "Well, Katherine Brennan, you picked a hell of a day to be out in a snowstorm." "Where did you come from, Winnemucca?" she managed. "Running." His arm tightened around her. "From who?" "Bad men, very bad men." She felt him tense, and his free hand moved to the rifle secured to his saddle. "They still following you, maybe. I do not know." "Then we move fast." True to his word, Zachary pushed the horse hard through the storm. Katherine drifted in and out, aware only of his warmth and the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. At some point the wind seemed to lessen, and she heard Zachary make a sound of relief. "There it is," he said. Katherine forced her eyes open and saw a small wooden structure materialize out of the snow. It was rough built but solid, with a stone chimney and a narrow porch. Zachary guided the horse right up to the door, then dismounted and lifted Katherine down. He kicked the door open, carried her inside, and laid her on a narrow cot against the far wall. The shack was one room, maybe 12 feet square, with a potbelly stove, a rough table, and not much else. But it was shelter, and that was everything. Zachary left her just long enough to bring his horse and mule under the small lean-to attached to the side of the building. Then he was back, arms full of saddlebags and supplies. He knelt beside the stove and worked with practiced efficiency, building a fire from kindling and wood that had been left stacked beside it. Within minutes, flames were crackling and warmth began to spread through the small space. Then he turned to Katherine, and his expression was serious. "I need to get you out of those wet clothes, or you are going to lose fingers and toes. Maybe worse." She understood. She tried to help, but her hands would not work. Zachary was gentle but quick, peeling away her soaked dress, her undergarments, everything. She should have felt ashamed, but she was too cold, too far gone. He wrapped her in a thick wool blanket, then another, then began to rub her hands and feet, trying to restore circulation. The pain, when it came, was excruciating. As her frozen flesh began to thaw, it felt like 1,000 knives stabbing into her extremities. She cried out, and Zachary's face was grim. "I know it hurts," he said, "but it is a good sign. It means you still have feeling. Just breathe through it." Katherine gritted her teeth and endured. Gradually, the worst of the pain faded to a dull ache, and she could wiggle her fingers and toes. Zachary heated water in a battered kettle and made her drink it in small sips. Then he made coffee, strong and bitter, and that helped even more. As the warmth returned to her body and the fog cleared from her mind, Katherine became acutely aware of her situation. She was naked under these blankets, alone in a tiny shack with a strange man in the middle of a snowstorm. The ledger was still tucked against her ribs, but her dress was hanging by the stove to dry. Zachary seemed to sense her discomfort. He moved to the far side of the small room and sat on the floor with his back against the wall, giving her as much space as possible. "You are safe," he said quietly. "I give you my word." Katherine studied him. He had removed his hat, revealing dark brown hair that fell almost to his collar. His clothes were those of a working cowboy, worn denim trousers, a flannel shirt, a leather vest. His gun belt hung from a peg on the wall, within his reach but not on his hip. Everything about him spoke of competence and self-reliance. "Why were you out in the storm?" she asked, her voice still hoarse. "Heading back to my ranch," he said. "I have a small spread about 10 miles north of here." I had been in Winnemucca buying supplies and checking on a horse I had for sale. When the storm hit, I figured I would wait it out here rather than risk getting lost in a whiteout. "You live alone?" "I have a ranch hand, old fellow named Gus. He is watching the place while I am gone. Zachary poured himself some coffee. Your turn. Who are the bad men you were running from? Katherine hesitated. She had learned not to trust easily. But this man had saved her life. He had shown her nothing but kindness, and she needed help. Marcus Aldrich, she said. Do you know the name? Zachary's expression darkened. I know it. Owns the Red Mountain Mining Company. Big man in Winnemucca. Rich and well-connected. And a murderer and a thief. She told him everything then, about overhearing the conversation about the ledger, about running. Zachary listened without interrupting, his face growing harder with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, That ledger. You still have it, Katherine nodded toward her dress. In the lining. Then you have something worth killing for, Zachary said. Aldrich is not going to stop looking. He has money and men, and you are right that he owns lawmen. Sheriff Cobb in Winnemucca is in his pocket for sure. I know. That is why I was trying to get to Carson City. The federal marshal there is supposed to be honest. Supposed to be, Zachary agreed. But it is a long way to Carson City, especially with half the county looking for you. Katherine felt despair settling over her. Then what do I do? Zachary looked at her and something shifted in his expression. You do not do anything, we do, you and me together. Why would you help me? You do not even know me. I know enough, he said. I know you risked your life to stop something evil. I know you have more courage than most men I have met. And I know that I am not the kind of person who can walk away from someone in need. Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her kindness without expecting something in return. Thank you, she whispered. Zachary nodded. Get some rest. The storm is going to blow for a while yet. When it clears, we will figure out our next move. But Katherine found she could not rest. She was exhausted, yes, but her mind would not stop racing. She watched Zachary as he moved about the small shack, checking the fire, seeing to his animals through the door to the lean-to, preparing a simple meal of beans and bacon. He moved with an easy grace, comfortable in his own skin. How long have you had your ranch? She asked. 3 years, he said. Saved up for 10 years before that, working cattle drives and breaking horses. Finally had enough to buy a section of land and some breeding stock. It is not much, but it is mine. That must be a good feeling. It is, he said. First time in my life I have felt like I have roots, like I belong somewhere. Where are you from originally? Texas. San Antonio. My father was a ranger, got killed by Comanche raiders when I was 12. My mother tried to keep the family together, but it was hard. I have 2 younger sisters. When I was 16, I headed north to find work so I could send money back. Do you still send money when I can? My sisters are both married now, living good lives. My mother passed 2 years ago. Heart gave out. He stirred the beans. What about you? Any family? Not anymore, Katherine said. They are all gone. It has been just me for a while now. Zachary looked at her and there was understanding in his eyes. I am sorry. So am I. They ate in companionable silence. The beans were plain but hot, and Katherine realized she had not eaten since the previous day. Zachary gave her the larger portion without comment. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and snow piled against the walls. But inside the little shack, with the fire crackling and the coffee warm, Katherine felt safer than she had in years. She also felt something else, something she had not expected. She felt drawn to this quiet, steady man who had appeared out of the storm like something from a dream. She watched the way the firelight played across his features, highlighting the strong lines of his face. She saw the way his hands moved, capable and sure. And when his eyes met hers across the small space, she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the cold. Zachary seemed to feel it too. His gaze lingered on her face, and she saw something warm kindle in those dark eyes. You should get some sleep, he said, his voice rougher than before. "You have been through an ordeal." Katherine nodded and lay back on the cot, pulling the blankets up to her chin. Her dress was still damp, but the shack was warm enough now that she was comfortable. She watched as Zachary settled on the floor again, using his saddle as a pillow. "Zachary," she said softly. "Yes, you said I would never run alone again. Did you mean that?" In the firelight, she saw him smile. It transformed his face, making him look younger and somehow more open. "I meant it," he said. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." Katherine closed her eyes, and for the first time in months she slept without fear. She woke to pale morning light filtering through the small window. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried in snow. Zachary was already up, boiling coffee and frying salt pork on the stove. "How do you feel?" he asked when he saw her stir. "Better," Katherine said, and it was true. Her body ached and her feet were tender, but the deadly cold was gone. "Much better. Good. I checked on the horses. They are fine. Once we eat, we need to talk about what comes next." Katherine sat up, clutching the blankets around herself. Her dress was dry now, and Zachary politely turned his back while she pulled it on. It was wrinkled and stained, but it was warm. When they were both seated at the small table with coffee and food, Zachary pulled out a stub of pencil and began drawing on a scrap of paper. "We are here," he said, marking a spot. "Winnemucca is about 5 miles southeast. My ranch is 10 miles north. Carson City is almost 100 miles south and west." "That is a long way," Katherine said. "It is, and Aldrich will have men watching the roads and the towns between here and there. But I have an idea." He tapped the paper. "We go north to my ranch first. You can stay there while I ride to the next town over, Golconda. There is a telegraph office there. I can wire the federal marshal directly, tell him what we have. Then he can send men to escort us safely to Carson City." "But what if Aldrich has men in Golconda too?" "He might. But it is less likely than in Winnemucca or on the main road south. And if I go alone on a fast horse, I can be there and back in a day." Katherine considered. It was risky, but everything was risky now. And the thought of spending time at Zachary's ranch, of having a safe place to rest and recover, was immensely appealing. "What about your ranch hand? Can we trust him?" "Gus," Zachary smiled. "He is 70 years old and has been cowboying since before I was born. He is honest as the day is long. And he is handy with a rifle if it comes to that." "All right," Katherine said. "We do it your way." They set out an hour later. Zachary gave Katherine his heavy coat again and wrapped himself in a wool poncho. The sun was bright on the fresh snow, making everything sparkle like diamonds. It was beautiful and treacherous. The cold was bone deep, and the going was slow. Zachary led his horse with Katherine mounted in the saddle. The mule followed behind, carrying supplies. They moved steadily north, skirting the main roads and keeping to the cover of the hills. Twice, Zachary held up a hand and they froze, waiting while riders passed in the distance. Katherine's heart hammered in her chest, but the riders never came close. It was afternoon when they finally saw the ranch. It was nestled in a small valley, protected from the worst of the wind by a ridge of hills. There was a house, small but well built, with a barn, a corral, and several outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney. As they approached, an old man emerged from the barn. He was bowlegged and grizzled, with a tobacco-stained beard and sharp blue eyes. He carried a rifle loosely in the crook of his arm. "About damn time you got back," the old man said. "Thought maybe the storm got you." "Good to see you too, Gus," Zachary said. He helped Katherine down from the horse. "This is Katherine Brennan. She is going to be staying with us for a bit. Katherine, this is Gus McReady." Gus looked Katherine up and down, his expression shrewd. "She in some kind of trouble, the bad kind," Zachary said. "I will explain inside." Let us get the horses settled first." They worked together, seeing to the animals, brushing them down and giving them feed and water. The barn was tidy and well organized, with 3 other horses in stalls and a milk cow chewing her cud in the corner. In the house, Katherine looked around with interest. It was simple but clean, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, and 2 smaller rooms off the back that were clearly bedrooms. There was a fireplace, handmade furniture, and shelves lined with books. She had not expected the books. Zachary saw her looking and said, "My mother taught me to read. She always said an educated man had more choices in life." She was right, Katherine said. Over the next hour, Zachary explained the situation to Gus. The old cowboy listened, occasionally spitting tobacco juice into a can, his expression growing darker. "Marcus Aldrich," he said when Zachary finished. "Always knew that man was no good. Got that slick look about him like a snake oil salesman." He looked at Katherine. "You got sand, girl." Most folks would not have the guts to cross a man like that. "I did not have much choice," Katherine said. "I could not let innocent people hang for his crimes." "Still took guts," Gus said. He turned to Zachary. "So you are riding to Golconda tomorrow, first light," Zachary confirmed. "I need you to stay here with Katherine. Keep watch. If anyone comes around, anyone at all, you get her out of here and head for the high country. There is a cave system up on Eagle Ridge. You remember it?" "I remember," Gus said. "Used it during that Indian scare 3 years back." "Good. Take supplies up there tonight, just in case." They spent the evening preparing. Gus packed a bag with food, blankets, and ammunition, then rode out to cache it in the hills. Zachary checked and cleaned his weapons. Katherine helped where she could, but mostly she felt useless and anxious. As night fell, Gus made himself scarce, announcing he would sleep in the barn to keep an eye on things. Katherine suspected it was really to give her and Zachary some privacy. They sat by the fire, the house quiet around them. Katherine was acutely aware that she would be sleeping in Zachary's bed tonight while he took the floor. He had insisted, and she had not had the energy to argue. "Are you scared?" Zachary asked. Katherine considered lying, then decided against it. "Yes, terrified." "What if something happens to you tomorrow? What if Aldrich's men are in Golconda?" "I will be careful," Zachary said. He reached over and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, and Katherine felt that flutter in her chest again. "I promise you, Katherine. I am not going to let anything happen to you." "It is not me I am worried about," she said, and realized it was true. Somewhere in the last day this man had become important to her. The thought of him riding into danger made her stomach twist. Zachary seemed surprised. "You are worried about me?" "Of course I am. You have already done so much. If something happened to you because of me, I could not bear it." He squeezed her hand gently. "Nothing is going to happen. I have been in tight spots before. I know how to take care of myself." They sat in silence for a while, hands still clasped. Then Zachary said, "When this is over, when Aldrich is behind bars and you are safe, what will you do?" Katherine had not thought that far ahead. "I do not know. I suppose I will need to find work somewhere, maybe in Carson City, start over." "You could stay here," Zachary said quietly. "If you wanted. There is always work on a ranch, and it is a good place, peaceful." Katherine's heart skipped. "Are you offering me a job?" Zachary met her eyes, and there was something intense in his gaze. "I am offering you a home if you want it." She should have been cautious. Should have reminded herself that they had only known each other for a day. But Katherine had learned to trust her instincts, and every instinct she had was screaming that this man was different, that he was good and true and worth the risk. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." Zachary smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Then it is settled. When this is done, you come back here. We will figure out the rest together." They talked long into the night, sharing stories and dreams. Katherine learned that Zachary loved horses more than anything, that he wanted to build his ranch into something substantial, that he dreamed of having a family someday. She told him about her childhood, about her parents, about the years of loneliness after they died. Finally, exhaustion claimed them both. Zachary banked the fire and gave Katherine his bed, then settled on the floor with a bedroll. Katherine lay awake for a long time, listening to his steady breathing and feeling safer than she had in years. Morning came cold and clear. Zachary was up before dawn, preparing for the ride to Golconda. Katherine made breakfast while he saddled his fastest horse, a big roan gelding named Red. "I should be back by nightfall," he said as he checked his rifle and pistol. "Tomorrow morning at the latest if the weather turns. You stay inside as much as possible. Do what Gus tells you." "I will," Katherine promised. She walked him out to where Red waited, stamping and blowing steam in the cold air. Zachary mounted up, then looked down at Katherine. His expression was serious. "I need to say something in case I do not get another chance." "Do not talk like that," Katherine said, fear clutching her heart. "Just listen. Katherine, I know we just met. I know this is crazy, but I have never felt this way about anyone before. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and I think I am falling in love with you." Katherine felt tears spring to her eyes. "Zachary, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know, so when I come back you will understand why I am fighting so hard to keep you safe." "You fool," Katherine said, but she was smiling through her tears. "I am falling in love with you too. So you better come back, Zachary Ironwood. You better come back to me." His grin was bright and fierce. Then he leaned down from the saddle, cupped her face in his hand, and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining. "I will be back," he said. "I promise." Then he wheeled Red around and galloped out of the yard, headed north. Katherine stood watching until he disappeared over the ridge, her fingers pressed to her lips. Gus came to stand beside her. "That boy has got it bad," he said. "So do I," Katherine admitted. "Good. He deserves some happiness. He has worked hard for everything he has got. It would be nice to see him have someone to share it with." The day passed slowly. Katherine helped Gus with chores around the ranch, feeding animals and mending tack. It felt good to work with her hands, to do something productive. Gus was a font of stories about the old days, and his tales helped keep her mind off Zachary. But as evening approached and there was no sign of him, Katherine's anxiety grew. She stood on the porch, staring north, willing him to appear. "He is fine," Gus said from behind her. "Probably just taking his time, making sure he was not followed." "Probably," Katherine agreed, but she could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Night fell. They ate a quiet dinner. Gus kept his rifle close, and Katherine noticed he had locked all the doors and shuttered the windows. He was worried too, even if he would not say it. They were just finishing the dishes when they heard hoofbeats. Multiple horses coming fast. "Get back," Gus said, cocking his rifle. He moved to the window and peered through a crack in the shutters. Then he cursed. "4 riders, could be anyone, but I am not taking chances. Katherine, you know where that bag is cached?" "Yes," she said, her heart pounding. "Then you go, now. Out the back, take one of the horses and do not stop until you reach that cave. I will hold them here, give you time." "I am not leaving you to face them alone," Katherine protested. "You are, and that is an order from your employer," Gus said with a crooked grin. "Now get." Katherine hesitated one more second, then ran. She burst out the back door and sprinted for the barn. Behind her, she heard shouting, then a gunshot. Her hands shook as she saddled the nearest horse, a gentle mare named Daisy. Another shot rang out, then several in quick succession. Katherine led Daisy out through the back of the barn and mounted. She could see fire lighting the sky. They had set something ablaze. She wanted to go back to help Gus, but she knew he had sacrificed himself to give her a chance. She could not waste it. She urged Daisy up into the hills, following the path Gus had described. The mare was sure-footed even in the dark, and they made good time. Behind her, the shooting had stopped. Katherine's eyes burned with tears, but she kept going. It took an hour to reach the cave. It was hidden behind a tumble of boulders, with a narrow entrance that widened into a chamber large enough for horse and rider. Katherine found the cached supplies where Gus had left them. She unsaddled Daisy, covered her with a blanket, and settled in to wait. She did not sleep. Every sound made her jump, certain it was Aldrich's men coming for her. But the night passed quietly, and dawn came gray and cold. Katherine knew she had to move. She could not stay in the cave forever. But where could she go? She had no idea if Zachary had made it to Golconda. For all she knew, he was dead too. She was considering her options when she heard a horse approaching. One horse, moving slowly. Katherine grabbed the rifle from the supply pack and positioned herself behind a boulder, sighting down the barrel. The horse and rider came into view. The rider was slumped forward, barely staying in the saddle, but Katherine would recognize that silhouette anywhere. "Zachary!" she screamed, dropping the rifle and running. He nearly fell getting down from Red. Katherine caught him and they sank to the ground together. He was pale and sweating, and there was blood on his shirt. "You are hurt," she said, her hands shaking as she tried to assess the damage. "Just a graze," he said through gritted teeth. "Aldrich had men in Golconda. They were waiting. I managed to send the telegram first, but they shot at me as I left town. One got lucky." Katherine tore open his shirt. The wound was on his left side, just above his hip. The bullet had carved a furrow through his flesh but had not lodged. It was bleeding heavily. "We need to stop this bleeding," she said, forcing herself to stay calm. She ran back to the cave for the supplies, then used clean cloth to pack the wound. Zachary hissed in pain but did not cry out. "I went back to the ranch," he said as she worked. "It is burned. The house, the barn, everything." "I found Gus. He is dead, Katherine. They shot him." "I know," Katherine whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He saved me. He gave me time to get away." Zachary's face was a mask of grief and rage. "I am going to make them pay, Aldrich and every man who rides with him." "First we need to get you patched up," Katherine said. "And we need to figure out what to do next. Did the telegram get through?" "I think so. I gave them everything. The marshal's name, the situation, our location. If it went through, help should be coming, but it might take days." "Then we wait," Katherine said. "We have supplies. We have shelter. We can last until help arrives." She helped Zachary into the cave and made him as comfortable as possible. The wound was painful but not life-threatening if she could keep it clean. She boiled water, cleaned and rebandaged him, then made him drink and eat. They spent that day and night in the cave. Zachary developed a fever and Katherine sat by him, cooling his forehead with damp cloths and making him drink water. In his delirium, he talked about his mother, his sisters, his dreams for the ranch. And he talked about Katherine, saying her name over and over. By the second morning, the fever had broken. Zachary was weak but clear-headed. "You saved my life," he said, looking at Katherine with wonder. "You saved mine first," she replied. "I think we are even." "Not even close," he said. He reached up and touched her face. "Katherine, I meant what I said before I left. I love you. I think I have loved you since the moment I found you in that snowstorm." Katherine leaned into his touch. "I love you too. I was so afraid I had lost you." "You did not. And you are not going to. We are going to get through this. Then we are going to rebuild the ranch, our lives, together." "Together," Katherine agreed. On the third day they heard horses again, many horses. Katherine grabbed the rifle, her heart in her throat. But then she saw the uniforms. Federal marshals, a dozen of them, led by a tall man with a steel-gray beard. "Katherine Brennan," the man called. "My name is Marshal Robert Hawkins. We received a telegram from Zachary Ironwood. Are you here?" Katherine stepped out from behind the boulders, rifle lowered. "I am here. Zachary is with me. He is hurt." The marshals surrounded the cave, and Marshal Hawkins dismounted. He was a stern-looking man, but his eyes were kind. "Let us see this ledger you risked your life for." Katherine retrieved the ledger from where she had kept it hidden. Hawkins paged through it, his expression growing darker. "This is enough to hang Aldrich and a dozen others. You did well, Miss Brennan, very well." Over the next hours, the marshals organized. They sent riders to arrest Aldrich and his men. They arranged for a doctor to come treat Zachary. They took statements from both Katherine and Zachary. Hawkins sat with them as the sun set. "Aldrich will hang," he said. "You have my word on that, and the Chinese workers will be exonerated." "You saved innocent lives, Miss Brennan." "A lot of good people died because of this," Katherine said, thinking of Gus. "They did," Hawkins agreed, "but their sacrifice meant something. That counts for a lot." The marshals escorted them to Carson City, where Zachary received proper medical care. Katherine testified before a judge, presenting the ledger and her eyewitness account. The trial was swift. Marcus Aldrich and 3 of his top men were sentenced to hang. The rest received long prison terms. It was over. Katherine and Zachary stayed in Carson City for 2 months while he healed. They stayed in a small hotel in separate rooms, though Katherine spent most of her time at Zachary's side. They talked for hours every day, learning everything about each other. And slowly, the relationship that had been forged in crisis deepened into something real and lasting. When Zachary was well enough to travel, they returned north to his ranch, or what was left of it. The buildings were blackened ruins, but the land was still there. The horses had survived, scattered into the hills, and the dream was still alive. "We can rebuild," Zachary said, standing in what had been the main room of the house. "It will take time and money, but we can do it." "We will rebuild," Katherine corrected. "Together." They started that very day. They lived in a tent while they worked, clearing the rubble and laying new foundations. Neighbors came to help, good people who had known Gus and respected Zachary. Slowly, a new house began to rise. One evening, as they sat by the campfire exhausted from a long day of work, Zachary took Katherine's hand. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the future, about what I want." "What do you want?" Katherine asked. "You," he said simply, "for the rest of my life." "Katherine Brennan, will you marry me?" Katherine's heart felt like it would burst. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married a month later in the new church in Golconda. It was a small ceremony, just a few friends and neighbors. Katherine wore a simple dress of blue calico, and Zachary wore his best suit. She had never seen him look more handsome. The preacher spoke of love and commitment, of 2 people becoming one. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed Katherine with such tenderness that she thought she might cry from the sheer joy of it. They spent their wedding night in the partially completed house, in the bedroom that Zachary had finished first. They made love slowly and carefully, learning each other's bodies, expressing with touch what words could not capture. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Katherine thought about how far she had come. From a desperate woman fleeing in a snowstorm to this safe, loved home. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, his hand stroking her hair. "That I am the luckiest woman alive," Katherine said. "I am pretty sure I am the lucky one," Zachary replied. The months turned into a year. The house was completed, along with a new barn and outbuildings. Zachary hired 2 new ranch hands, good men who worked hard and asked no questions about the past. The horse breeding operation thrived. Katherine discovered she had a gift for managing the business side of things, keeping the books and negotiating sales. But the greatest joy came when Katherine realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening after supper, and he literally lifted her off her feet and spun her around, whooping with delight. "Careful," she laughed. "You will make me dizzy." "I am going to be a father," he said, his eyes shining. "We are going to be parents." Their son was born the following spring in 1878 during a warm April night. Zachary paced outside while the midwife attended Katherine. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly broke the door down getting inside. Katherine was tired but radiant, holding a red-faced, squalling infant. "Come meet your son," she said. Zachary took the baby with shaking hands, staring down at the tiny face with absolute wonder. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Katherine's father. He was a healthy, happy baby who grew into a rambunctious toddler. Zachary was a devoted father, teaching his son to ride almost before he could walk, carrying him around the ranch and explaining everything in a patient voice. Katherine often stood on the porch of their home, watching her husband and son together, and marveled at how much her life had changed. She had been so alone, so afraid, and now she had this: a family, a home, a purpose. 2 years after Thomas was born, Katherine had another child, a daughter they named Sarah. She had Katherine's red hair and Zachary's dark eyes, and she was the apple of her father's eye from the moment she drew breath. The ranch continued to prosper. Zachary's reputation as a horse breeder grew, and they began selling animals as far away as California and Colorado. They added cattle to their operation, and Katherine hired a teacher to come live with them and educate the children. But through all the success and growth, the foundation of their life remained the love between Katherine and Zachary. They still talked for hours, still stole moments alone when they could. Zachary still looked at Katherine like she was the most precious thing in his world, and Katherine still felt that flutter in her chest every time he walked into a room. One evening, when Thomas was 8 and Sarah was 6, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were playing with a litter of puppies while Zachary and Katherine sat close together on the bench he had built. "You ever think about that day?" Katherine asked. "When you found me in the storm, all the time," Zachary said. "It was the best day of my life. Even though you got shot and lost your ranch, because I found you. And everything that came after, everything we have built together, it all started in that moment." He kissed her temple. "I meant what I said that day. You never run alone again, and you never will." "Neither will you," Katherine said, taking his hand. They sat together as the light faded, their children's laughter filling the air, the land stretching out around them peaceful and prosperous. They had fought for this. They had suffered and bled and loved their way to this moment, and it was worth every second. The years continued to unfold with a kind of gentle grace that Katherine had never imagined possible. Thomas grew tall and strong, with his father's steadiness and his mother's fierce intelligence. By the time he was 15, he was working the ranch alongside Zachary, learning every aspect of the business. Sarah, at 13, had developed a talent for healing. She helped birth foals and tended sick animals with a natural intuition that amazed everyone. But the family was not done growing. When Katherine was 37, she discovered she was pregnant again. It was unexpected, and she worried about complications at her age. But Zachary was thrilled, and his confidence bolstered her own. Their third child was another son, born in the winter of 1889. They named him Augustus, after Gus Macready, the man whose sacrifice had saved Katherine all those years ago. Little Augustus had his father's dark hair and a temperament that could only be described as joyful. He laughed more than he cried, and from the moment he could toddle around, he followed his older siblings everywhere. The ranch had expanded significantly by then. They now ran 500 head of cattle and had one of the most respected horse breeding programs in Nevada. Zachary had built Katherine a larger house, with a proper parlor and a bedroom for each child. There were shelves full of books, and Katherine had started a small school on the property, teaching not just her own children but also the children of their ranch hands. One day in the spring of 1892, a visitor arrived at the ranch. Katherine was in the garden when she saw the buggy approaching. She shaded her eyes against the sun and then felt her heart skip. She recognized the driver. Marshal Robert Hawkins had aged in the 14 years since she had last seen him. His beard was fully white now, and he moved a bit more slowly, but his eyes were still sharp and kind. "Marshal Hawkins," Katherine said, wiping her hands on her apron. "This is a surprise." "Mrs. Ironwood," he said, tipping his hat. "I hope I am not intruding. I was passing through on my way to retirement in California, and I wanted to stop and see how you were doing." "I am doing wonderfully," Katherine said. "Please, come inside. Zachary will want to see you." Over coffee and cake, the marshal caught them up on his life. He had spent the last decade and a half cleaning up corruption throughout the territory. "That ledger you recovered," he said, "it was like pulling a thread. The whole rotten system started to unravel. We brought down 3 more crooked operations in the years that followed." "I am glad it made a difference," Katherine said. "It made all the difference," Hawkins assured her. He looked around the comfortable house, at the children's drawings on the walls, at the evidence of a happy, thriving family. "You have built a good life here." "We have," Zachary agreed, his arm around Katherine's shoulders. "The best life." Before Hawkins left, he pulled a letter from his pocket. "I almost forgot. This came to the marshal's office a few months back. It was forwarded from Winnemucca. I thought you might want it." Katherine opened the letter with trembling hands. It was from the Chinese Workers' Association of Nevada. They thanked her, in careful English, for her courage in exposing the plot against their people. They told her that the men who would have been hanged were now free and prosperous, running their own businesses and raising families. They called her a hero and a friend. Katherine read the letter aloud to Zachary, her voice catching with emotion. When she finished, she carefully folded it and placed it in her Bible, where she kept all her most precious things. "You saved those men's lives," Zachary said softly. "You saved mine." "You have touched so many people, Katherine." "We have touched them together," she corrected. As the 1890s progressed, the Ironwood Ranch became a fixture in northern Nevada. Thomas, now a young man of 22, had married a sweet girl named Emily from Golconda, and they had built a house on the far end of the property. They gave Katherine and Zachary their first grandchild in 1895, a girl they named Katherine in honor of her grandmother. Sarah, at 20, was being courted by a young veterinarian from Reno. Katherine approved. The young man, Daniel, was kind and intelligent, and he clearly adored Sarah. Zachary was less convinced, viewing every young man who came around with deep suspicion. But even he had to admit that Daniel was a good match for their independent daughter. Augustus, at 6, was still the baby of the family and the light of Katherine's life. He had his father's love of horses and his mother's love of books, and he could often be found sitting in the barn reading to the animals. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Katherine on a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch together since their honeymoon, and Katherine was both excited and nervous. She had never been to a big city. San Francisco was overwhelming and wonderful. They stayed in a grand hotel, ate in restaurants where the food was served on china plates, and went to the theater. Zachary bought Katherine a necklace with a small diamond pendant, and she cried when he fastened it around her neck. "You deserve all of this and more," he said. "You deserve the world." "I have the world," Katherine replied. "I have you." On their last night in the city, they walked along the waterfront, watching the ships come and go. Zachary pulled Katherine close, and they stood together as the fog rolled in. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying with me instead of going to the city, making a different life." Katherine turned to face him, placing her hands on either side of his face. At 40, he was even more handsome than the young man who had found her in that snowstorm. There was silver in his hair now and lines around his eyes, but those eyes still held the same warmth and steadiness. "I have never regretted a single moment," she said. "You are my home, Zachary. You always have been." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, right there on the waterfront with the city lights twinkling behind them. And Katherine felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt all those years ago. They returned to the ranch rejuvenated, ready for whatever came next. And what came next was Sarah's wedding to Daniel. It was a grand affair, with people coming from 3 counties to celebrate. Katherine cried through the entire ceremony, and Zachary's hand shook as he walked his daughter down the aisle, but they were tears of joy. Sarah was radiant, and Daniel promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his days. Katherine believed him. With Sarah married and Thomas already settled, the big house felt a bit quieter. But Augustus filled it with noise and energy, and Katherine loved having time to focus on her youngest. The new century arrived with great fanfare. On January 1, 1900, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sun rise on a new era. Katherine was 45 now, Zachary 48. They had been together for more than 20 years. "We have lived a lot of life," Zachary said, his arm around Katherine. "We have," she agreed, "and we have a lot more ahead of us." She was right. The early years of the new century brought more grandchildren. Thomas and Emily had 2 more babies, boys named James and Robert. Sarah and Daniel had a son they called Michael. Augustus grew into a thoughtful teenager, talking about going to university to study veterinary medicine like his brother-in-law. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, allowing Zachary and Katherine to step back a bit. They spent their time traveling occasionally, visiting their children and grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. Katherine started writing during this period. She wrote about her life, about the snowstorm and Zachary and the ledger. She wrote about Gus's sacrifice and the trial and the building of the ranch. She called it a memoir, though she never tried to publish it. It was simply for her family, so they would know the story. Zachary read each page as she completed it, and often they would sit together in the evenings, remembering. They laughed and cried and marveled at how much they had been through. "We could have died so many times," Katherine said one night. "In the storm at the cave during the trial. We could have lost everything. But we did not," Zachary said. "We fought and we survived and we built this beautiful life. That is what matters." In 1910, on their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a grand party. It was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. Friends and neighbors came from miles around. Augustus, now 21 and in his final year of veterinary school, gave a speech that made Katherine cry. "My parents," he said, "are living proof that true love exists. They have shown me and my siblings what it means to be committed to another person, to face hardships together, to build something lasting. Everything I am, everything we all are, is because of their love and sacrifice." Katherine looked at Zachary, and he looked back at her, and she saw her whole life reflected in his eyes. The terror of the snowstorm, the hope of that first morning in the lined shack, the pain of loss and the joy of building something new. The love, always the love, carrying them through everything. "Thank you," she whispered to him, "for everything, for finding me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "Thank you for letting me," he replied. "You made me whole, Katherine. You made me the man I always wanted to be." They danced that night, slowly and carefully, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. The music was sweet, and the stars were bright, and Katherine thought about the girl who had run into that snowstorm all those years ago. That girl had been alone and afraid and desperate. She was alone no more. The years continued their steady march. Augustus finished his studies and returned to Nevada, opening a veterinary practice in Winnemucca. He married a teacher named Helen, and they had 3 children in quick succession. Thomas and Emily's oldest son, James, showed an interest in politics and was elected to the state legislature. Sarah and Daniel moved to a small ranch of their own, raising both children and cattle with great success. Katherine and Zachary became pillars of their community. They were the couple people pointed to as an example of what marriage should be. They donated money to build a new school in Golconda and funded a library in Winnemucca in memory of Gus McCready. On warm evenings, they still sat on the porch together, holding hands and watching the sun set. Their hair was white now, and their bodies moved more slowly, but the connection between them was as strong as ever. "You remember what you said to me in the lined shack?" Katherine asked one evening in 1920. They were 70 and 73 now, old by any standard but still sharp and engaged. "I said a lot of things in that lined shack," Zachary replied with a smile. "You said I would never run alone again," Katherine said. "And I have not once in 42 years. "And you never will," Zachary promised. "Not until the day I die, and maybe not even then. I plan to haunt you if I go first." Katherine laughed. "I would expect nothing less." But fate was kind to them. They did not have to face the agony of losing each other. In the spring of 1922, during a particularly warm April, they both fell ill. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia and did what he could, but at their age, there was little to be done. Their children gathered around them. Thomas and Sarah and Augustus, with their spouses and children. The grandchildren, some with babies of their own. 3 generations of Ironwoods, all products of that moment when a cowboy found a woman in a snowstorm and promised she would never be alone again. Katherine and Zachary lay in their bed, hands clasped together. They were lucid enough to say their goodbyes, to tell each person they loved them, to make sure everyone knew how proud they were. On a bright morning in May, with the sun streaming through the windows and their family surrounding them, Katherine and Zachary Ironwood took their last breaths. Katherine went first, slipping away peacefully. Zachary followed less than an hour later, his last word her name. They were buried together on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a large oak tree that Zachary had planted the year they were married. Their headstone was simple: Zachary Ironwood. 1849–1922, Katherine Brennan Ironwood. 1855–1922, together in life. Together in death, never alone. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through Thomas's line. The story of Katherine and Zachary became family legend, told and retold at gatherings. Katherine's memoir was eventually published by one of her great-grandchildren, becoming a regional bestseller and a testament to the power of love and courage. But the real legacy was not in the land or the stories or even the descendants. It was in the proof that 2 people, thrown together by chance and circumstance, could build something extraordinary. That love, real love, could overcome anything. that a promise made in desperation could become the foundation of a lifetime. Katherine had run into that snowstorm alone, terrified and desperate, but she had never been alone again. From the moment Zachary found her, they had faced everything together. They had fought and struggled and triumphed. They had raised a family and built an empire and loved each other with a depth and devotion that inspired everyone who knew them. And when the end came, they had faced that together too, hand in hand, just as they had faced everything else. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, forged in hardship, and lasting until their final breaths. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, to the power of connection, to the simple truth that we are all better when we do not have to face the world alone. Katherine and Zachary Ironwood had proven that. They had lived it. And their story, their love, would echo through the years, a beacon of hope for anyone who ever felt lost or afraid or alone. Because in the end, love is what saves us. Love is what gives life meaning. And love, true love, never dies. It lives on in the hearts of those who remember, in the lives that were touched, in the legacy that remains. Katherine and Zachary had found that love in the most unlikely of circumstances. And they had held on to it, nurtured it, and let it bloom into something beautiful and enduring. They had never run alone again. And in that, they had found everything.